Hi, so today I wanted to go over universal learning methods. This is just according to my own observations from what I found tutoring with college students. And this is going to be presented as a four tent pole approach. So you know how tent poles are going to hold up the tarp or the canvas, and it props everything else up. So I'm using this as a metaphor for the four main learning methods that's going to prop up your student session, your tutoring session, and it's going to prop up your student learning their subject that they need tutoring in. So the four tent poles of learning are definitions, demonstration, examples, and organization. Definition is something that I've talked about before, but it's worth repeating. You make sure that the student reads the material and looks up every word they don't know. Never skip over the words you don't know, and don't go through and just try to figure out the meaning of the words from the context of what you're reading. Make sure the student actually looks those words up and gets a good idea of specifically what those words mean, because they might mean something general in English, but in the specific math or science category, they're probably going to mean something very specific and very detailed, and the student needs to know exactly what they're reading and the meaning of exactly the words that they're reading. Now, demonstration is when you demonstrate the concept to the student. You can use pictures by drawing a picture. You can use models. There are anatomy models with muscles and skeletons and everything for anatomy classes. You can use toys, cards, dice. I've used dice a lot to show probability. So if there's six sides to a dice, what's the probability of rolling a four? Well, there's one side with a four on it, so that's 1/6 is the probability of rolling a four in a dice. And to actually do that in front of the student shows them in real life in three dimensions, in real time and space, the concept that you're trying to demonstrate. And allow the student to play out the concept being studied. Like you can even use just common objects that are on the table in front of you and just stand them up and use them as models to show some concept, or you can draw a picture, and you'll see some examples of demonstrations later on in this video. Now, examples is kind of self-explanatory. It's when you work an example of whatever problem so the student can follow along and see how you do it. Now you want to start with a simple, straightforward example showing the problem, but you don't want to have too many left turns in there. You want to just get a really simple problem so you can do that and show the student the basic premise of how to solve the problem. And then once the student understands that, you can get more complex problems in there and make them increasingly more complicated as you go along. Now, organization is how does this information fit together? You can create a diagram, you can use flowcharts, outlines, concept mapping, or write a summary of each concept in the student's own words. What's important is that their notes, you want to take a look at their notes and see how well organized their notes are. If they're in outline form, and the student has it all organized, and that's great. Flowchart is great. But if you just see their note taking and it's just one long run-on sentence for pages and pages at a time, there's no organization to it, that's definitely a problem. Organization, especially in something like biology, organizing your notes is half of studying for biology. Same with math. You can't just write down problems in math and expect to be able to go back and reread those notes later and know what you're talking about. You have to actually take notes in math, and that includes defining the vocabulary words, like what's the definition of a polynomial, and also defining what the formulas are and writing those out. So definitions. This is a little bit more detailed on the definition. You never want to read past a word or a term that you don't know. If you end up getting stomach aches or headaches or feel sleepy or start yawning a lot, then probably chances are is the student has gone past words that they don't understand. Do not try to guess what the word means by the context of what the student's reading, because why are you paying for college classes in the first place if you're just going to try to gloss over the information? Also, it's not going to give you the correct definition if you just try to figure it out by the context. These are scientific principles, these are mathematical principles that you're studying, and you need to know specifically what exactly those terms mean. Also, a big thing that I highly recommend doing when you look up long words, break apart the long words into a prefix, a root, and a suffix, and define each of those. Like, for instance, carotid artery. Ot in carotid is Latin for ear, and ca means next to, id means pertaining to. So pertaining to, next to the ear, carotid. Carotid artery would be an artery pertaining to next to the ear. So that's how you can remember what carotid is and where carotid is in the body. It's an artery that goes up right past your ear. Here is a demonstration. This is an example of a demonstration. If you notice, there's a math problem there. Two cars are driving toward each other on a street with an initial distance 1.5 miles. A naughty dog is running between them. Two cars at 4 miles an hour and 6 miles an hour, respectively. The dog runs at 20 miles an hour. What is the total in miles that the dog runs? See, you can get really confused reading word problems for math, word problems in general, actually. But especially in math, the student might have problems interpreting the word problem and knowing how to solve that in math. So if you notice down here, if you look at this down here, this entire drawing down here, and they labeled what everything stands for. So here's the distance is 1.5 miles, the distance between the cars coming at each other. Here's the dog up here, and the dog's running, the velocity is 20 miles an hour. Over here, the velocity of the car is 4 miles an hour, and the velocity of this car is 6 miles an hour. You see how drawing it out makes it a lot less complex, and it makes it a lot more easy to understand. Now, organization, as we talked about, you're organizing your notes. You can use flowcharts, outlines, concept maps, or sometimes what you're studying calls for, writing a little summary of it in your own or in the student's own words. And even that you should be careful to make sure the student has those summaries organized, because summaries can very quickly become disorganized and you just want to include all the information you know in one thing. But so if the student wants to write out a summary, have them write a short paragraph in their own words of each concept on a different piece of paper. Use a different piece of paper every subject or every concept that the student's trying to illustrate in a summary. And here's some more examples of flowcharts, outlines, and concept maps. Here's a flowchart. This would be a flowchart of the blood circulation in the heart, as an example. See, it's really simple. Here's what the flowchart's about, but it's really simple. I didn't use any fancy graphics or anything, and this can be just written down in the student's notebook. But see, if you have a start right here, and then it starts in your superior and inferior vena cava, and then it goes to the right atrium. And then I used this color-coded, I made this color-coded because this is going through a valve. This isn't the chamber of the heart, like the black, like the right atrium is. So this is going through a valve. So the valves I color-coded in blue. So see, through the tricuspid atrioventricular valve, and then into the right ventricle, and that's a chamber, so that went back to being black, and then through the pulmonary semilunar valve, and into the pulmonary trunk and into the pulmonary arteries and into the respiratory system. And then from the respiratory system, it goes into the pulmonary veins, into the left atrium, through the bicuspid valve, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, I did a little bit of color coding on here, but other than that, it's very simple. No fancy special effects or anything. Just write it out with little arrows. See these little arrows designating that it's going to this next thing. So this would just be a simple flow chart demonstrating a process or a procedure, in this case where the blood travels in the heart. But you can do this for a lot of different biology concepts. Mitosis and meiosis are really good examples of how you of something you can do a flow chart for. Also the citric acid cycle, the Krebs cycle, any process or procedure really helps if you make a flow chart out of it so you can see the chain of events one after the other. Now here is the same thing, blood circulation in the heart, but this is what an outline of the information would look like. See, if you have up here Roman numeral 1, there's 4 chambers in the heart. The left atrium, the right atrium, the left ventricle, and the right ventricle. And then here's Roman numeral 2, 2 types of valves, the AV valves and the semilunar valves. And then you indent it more and you give another detail on it. And there are, if you don't remember how to do an outline, there are a lot of tutorials online. You can always Google how to take notes in an outline form to refresh your memory. But this is an example of one. And here is a concept map. As you can see, the concept map is sort of like a family tree. So the main subject goes in the middle here, and then the main details comes off of here, off of the center, main detail, main detail, main detail, and then off of the main detail you have little tiny details referring to the main detail, and it breaks off like this, like tree branches. So it's sort of, you can call it a learning tree, you can call it a concept map, but either way, this is a really good way to organize your notes. A lot of students like this because there's very little writing. It's more spatial, and with the spatial, um, in order to learn, you have to be able to look at things in 3D a lot of times, and this gives a spatial quality to the information, and so it's a lot easier to understand in a lot of cases.